Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to today's session on the awards program. For your information, that this is an actual discussion portion later on for Q&A. You'll be allowed to unmute or submit your questions using the chat. Simultaneous interpretation is available for those who'd like. Please select your language right now. And then now I'll pass you over to Colin from ULI, who will take you through the awards program. Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks, Diwa. So this is a first for us today to actually host a webinar which explains how best to put together an application and what types of things, generally speaking, we're looking for, whether the jury is looking for when they decide what makes a project suitable for an award for excellence. So just to start at the beginning, ULI Awards for Excellence has been going on a global basis, or at least on the basis of a US competition for many years. I think 1979 it began. We only began this round of competitions in the Asia Pacific a few years ago. I think it began in 2019. So this will be our fourth year in which we have held the Asia Pacific version. In terms of the numbers of applications we've had, we started off first year around 50 or so, and that's grown gradually over the last 3 years. I think last year we had 80 entries, and then about 15 are nominated for awards in any given year, together with perhaps another 5 or 6 that are nominated as finalists but don't make the last cut. It is probably, certainly in our view, one of the most widely recognized, if not the most widely recognized award among the development community in the world. Okay, thanks, Steve. Next one. So we do have, I mentioned before that there is a global program. We've arranged it right now so that there are 3 different awards. And there is one in the Americas, of course, which is the original one in Europe, which is much the same, and then the Asia Pacific version. All of them have competitions going roughly the same time as we do, and then all of the award winners from each of these programs will be automatically promoted to the Global Awards for Excellence. So it's sort of the best of the best that gets entered into the global program. And then that follows after we've decided, obviously, which winners there are in each of the individual markets. There's no further entry fee for entering the Global Awards program. Generally speaking, there's very little, if any, work, in fact, to do on your part, on the part of the applicant, to add more details. We'll simply take the submission that you have entered, and then the global jury, which is separate from the regional juries, will have a look and make the decisions. Possibly they'll ask for a bit more information, but generally speaking, there's nothing more to do. Okay, next one. And this is our jury. There are, generally speaking, about 12, or I think we've just expanded the jury in China in particular, because we have so many entries from China. We've added an extra jury member in Beijing. I won't go through all of them by name in detail. That is probably be a bit boring for you all, but suffice to say that they are all eminent members of the profession. They will be either, generally speaking, architects, designers, or planners on the one hand, and then developers and possibly real estate investors, private equity investors on the other. And they're split up between jurisdictions so that if any given entry from one market is promoted to be a finalist, then it's relatively easy for the jury member to go and do a site visit, which is the normal aspect, the normal practice, to have a good look at each project within their own markets. So we have 2 in Australia, 3, as I said, in China. There's 2 in Hong Kong, although we've only got 1 on the page here. We still have 1, which we're going to be nominating soon. 3 at the moment in Singapore, although usually there's only 2. 2 in Japan, and 1 each in the Philippines and in Korea. And as I say, I should perhaps mention again, the method is that there's 2 rounds by which the jury makes the decision. an initial round that filters out the majority of applicants. So if we have 80, as we did last year, we may have around 20 which make it to finalists. The jury then goes to the site, if it's possible to do the site visit. If it's not possible because of travel restrictions for COVID reasons, then we'll arrange for a virtual visit where we will have as good a site tour as we can over the internet using Zoom or some kind of webinar technology. And then the jury makes its final decision for who the winners are. Okay, next one, Ziwa. So this raises a question of what makes a good submission. This is not necessarily an easy question to answer because any given type of submission might require or benefit from different type of presentation. But generally speaking, there are various ways that we can say would make your submission stand out. Firstly, don't make it too long. And we say in the submission guidelines, and perhaps I should emphasize that most of the things I'm going to say now are already in the guidelines. So if you read those, then you'll also get an idea, probably a bit more detailed idea than what I'm going through now. But it doesn't help too much if your presentation is too long, because obviously if we have, say, 80 presentations or PowerPoints to get through within 2 days, which is how long the jury session, the first jury session lasts, then there's a limited amount of time that the jury can spend on any given presentation. So what we ask for is to limit the number of slides that you have in the PowerPoint presentation, which you give to the jury as part of your submission, and which, by the way, is the most important part of your submission, probably. And there's lots of details that you need to fill in as part of the submission. You have to give in the measurements, the types of a project that you're submitting, all of the various individual details. They are important, but the most important thing is your PowerPoint. So this is the thing you really need to spend time on. 20 pages, as I say. After that, you have to focus on the number of different photos that go in one particular image. Generally, anything between 2 and 4. Sometimes people will put in 8 or 10 images. That's too many. The jury won't be able to process that many if you have a tiling of images on one slide. It just gets lost in the clutter. So keep the images fairly big, use your strongest images, and that will help get the jury's attention. Don't use, one thing that we find that people tend to do quite a lot from the Chinese market in particular is to put in a lot of data on their slides. The place where the data goes is usually in your submission form. The jury doesn't want to see that in your PowerPoint. PowerPoint is really a graphical submission. It's going to show by pictures what your story of your project is about. So don't use too much data. If at any, just maybe one line that illustrates what your photo is about. Also, not the renderings. We don't want to see renderings in general. That you want to see the photographs because the renderings don't really tell what the project is about. It's just a question of what's being built, and we can only really see that through the photos. Also, it's important that, especially for projects that involve a community element, that you have people in the photos. Sometimes people send us photos of their project which is completely empty, maybe thinking that they don't want the clutter, they don't want people in there because it's distracting. That isn't right. We do want to see people in the images because it shows that it's being used. We want to show that there's vitality, that people are accessing it, that they are coming to the project, that it is serving the community. If it's empty, then it shows exactly the opposite. It shows something that's dead, that's sterile, where people aren't going. So do put people in your pictures for your submitted slides. We want to see images of both the inside and the outside of the building, probably in equal measure. Both are important. And also we want to show the project in the context of its surroundings. So we want to see it where it sits, how it fits into the rest of the community, and how hopefully it connects to the community in terms of allowing people to come and go easily. And finally, as far as this goes, do use extra market materials. If you've got, for example, other awards, then we'd like to see what those may be. If there are samples of instances where your project has been written about in the press, that's also quite interesting to see. And anything which shows that you've had some public attention and that people are looking at and caring about what your project is showing. Right. Now, there's a few of the projects which you've seen that have come through. Diva's been scrolling through them. One other aspect which these show is the diversity of types of projects that we have. There are the obvious ones that you would expect to see. You have office, you have retail, you have hotels, but they're not the only ones. Very often we have some quite different types of projects which come up. And this one that you can see right now, 798 Arts District in Beijing, very famous project in China. I'm sure probably most of you will know this one. Was an old factory district in Beijing, used to create military supplies. And it was built, I think, around the 1950s, at a time when it was on the outside of Beijing. And as Beijing grew, it became absorbed into the inner side of the city, and it was no longer really suitable for the geographical placement in which it was going to be found. So it was obvious it's going to be redeveloped. They decided, though, not to use the usual approach, just to make a new expensive residential project. And between the governments and local residents and also designers, they decided to redevelop it, reimagine it as an arts district. And so it succeeded on a number of levels. It serves the community rather than just being a residential project. It was fantastic in the sense of creating an interesting and innovative design approach to what is a very urban and very industrial landscape. And it was very successful in integrating into the community, one of the most successful, I think, tourist destinations in Beijing. So in terms of using its design and imaginative approach, this is the kind of unusual projects we very often get. It's not simply a question of the obvious candidates. And then another aspect, I think, which is important here to understand is that it's not, although this is in fact a big project, it's not only the big projects that we look for. And very often the ones that most impress the jury are ones that are small scale and ones that are carried out on a very small budget, but which use an imaginative approach to satisfy the various criteria within the awards. So don't think that just because you're not one of the big developers, you're not using one of the famous architects, that your project won't win. You still do have very good chance of winning as long as you satisfy the award criteria, even if you haven't spent an awful lot of money. It's certainly still worth presenting your project for an application. Okay, where are we now? This is another one actually we're thinking about. An unusual project, but not perhaps an unusual typology in China. This is an example of a river regeneration. Very often, of course, there are problems with pollution in China. And when factories and other industrial complexes need to get rid of their pollutants they have in the past, at least, not so much these days, but up until maybe 5 or 10 years ago, it was common to throw their pollution in the river. And so the rivers have never been used in Chinese cities as a place where they can attract the inhabitants of the city to go and use their leisure time. They tend to be very often industrial. They tend to be very sterile. They tend to be cut off from the city by roads. As you can see here in the bottom left picture, there's a large road. But elsewhere in the world and in general, there's no need for riverfronts to be like that. So there have been initiatives in China to regenerate riverfronts. And this is one which is very successful, where they've made the riverfront not only a large, very long park, but they also build facilities along the riverfront, which actually helped to filter out pollutants from the river and to boost the wildlife, the insect, the fish inhabitation, and generally to make it a pleasing and environmentally friendly environment. So again, an unusual, relatively unusual typology. This one, Universal Creative Square, it's used to be a Walmart, the American chain store warehouse in Wanjing, before Wanjing became a technology hub. Again, it became redundant in that context as Wanjing became much more gentrified, and as more money and more technology companies moved in, needed to be redeveloped. Not an easy development because it was it wasn't owned by one person, and you have 4 floors at the top that are owned by people within offices, and then a very large single open space at the bottom where the big warehouse used to be. And so it needed to be redeveloped in a way that allowed the 4 floors at the top to continue. The building was still inhabited the whole time, and also so that it could be turned into office space. In this case, they decided to divide up the space in a quite imaginative way, including quite a large atrium or open space that created light in the inside. Not natural light, unfortunately, but with imaginative use of lighting, they were able to create a very dynamic, open, airy environment. And at the same time, they were able to include a retail and a food and beverage element that served the entire community. Which I understand in Wanjing is lacking this type of retail space, because I think people prefer to use in what's a space short environment. They prefer to use the space to provide office facilities instead of food and beverage. So they actually provided opportunities for the public to come in and to serve the overall neighborhood. Okay, what do we have next? Universal Creative Square. This is a neighborhood development that was developed by Shui On Land up in Wuhan. And it's an example of a very large scale approach to development. They had a large piece of land that was given to them by the Wuhan government. It is actually part of the old French concession where the French had their trading port. And so they merged that historical context with a very large development that included, as you can see here in this pictures, residential, which was developed in a way which is very sensitive to the environment. You can see a lot of trees inside, a lot of winding pathways, creates an intimate environment where people are able to enjoy the context without being surrounded very much by traffic, without being exposed to pollution. They have, again, as you can see in the left-hand pictures, this concept of courtyard housing, which is traditionally Chinese, although of course in this context it is large scale, a lot of people living inside, but still giving you this idea of living within a rather private setting, and yet still being within the middle of a very large, bustling and public environment. Not only, though, are there residential aspects to the overall development, but there's very large commercial aspects. Firstly, in office, there's a couple of large office towers, and then also a very bustling and busy retail scene. Not necessarily, although within the office context, there are a couple of large malls, but on the street scale, it's mainly low-level retail that is aimed at some very often sort of arts scene. So people can go and see shops that are art galleries, or where you have food and beverage, which is owned by individuals rather than by large companies. So it creates more and instills a more of an intimate environment within the overall residential development. Okay, do we have more? Right, so I think at this point that sums up what types of projects we're looking for, or that you might want to submit, and some tips also on how you might fill in the application form and how best to create your PowerPoint so that it's an attractive submission as far as the jury is concerned. And Diwa now will give you an idea of how you can go about creating a submission to send to the jury.
Thank you, Colin. So everything that we have spoken about has been listed in the guidelines. Colin has gone in depth, of course, on the actual particular projects. However, everything can be found on the LinkedIn chat, which is on our website. There will be your submission guidelines, form examples, and a button to submit your project. So for your information, all the past winners is archived on the website as well for your reference should you wish to browse what constitutes to the winning projects and the types of images as well that we've used from their projects to give you an indication of the quality that we are looking at. Moving on now, we would like to open the floor to Q&A. I noticed we'd had a few during the session, so please feel free now to unmute to ask your question, or you can type your question in chat, even in Chinese, and we will have someone to translate it for Colin to answer. Thank you very much.
Hi, can I ask a question?
Please.
Yeah, so hi, Colin, this is Ken from
Hi, Ken.
Shanghai. I remember in the past, we used to have a form, application form, where people would actually write incomplete sentences, right? Answer the questions that are posed. You mentioned this PowerPoint with 20 slides. Is that in addition to the application form?
Absolutely, yes. In the previous page, Diwa had the web page from the ULI website, which links to the application form. So you click that button, it will take you to an application form. You log in, and then it will give you all of the various questions. It's quite detailed, actually. And there is also on this web page a sample form in Chinese or in English, in fact, in various languages, which you can download and then use as a reference to prepare the various materials you need to put in your submissions.
Right.
So yes, the short answer is there is a submission form. But as I said, I think the most important, and from my experience sitting in on jury meetings, the most important content as far as the overall jury is concerned is what's in the PowerPoint. That's what they're focused on mainly, and that's what makes the major impression. If you have a good PowerPoint, then you stand a pretty good chance. It's not just a question of filling in the form, giving all the details. As much as that is important, it is vital to get your PowerPoint right.
Right. So compared to last year, has there been any change to the content of the application form, the questions being asked?
Not really. It may change one or two details from the past. We do update a little bit to try and make it more relevant and to try and make it particularly clearer. And sometimes we get inquiries, of course, that people don't necessarily know how to fill it in. And you can tell by the number of inquiries you get what it is in the guidelines or in the submission form that maybe isn't clear. So we do try and upgrade it a little bit each year, but it's essentially the same. And I should say also, there is the option of filling in your, well, not filling in, but accessing an application form. When you click on that green button you see there on the web page, which is on the slide, you can get an application form which is in Chinese, or at least it's in bilingual languages, so it'll be in English and in Chinese. And that helps you, of course, to understand what you need to say. It is important, though, to understand that, unfortunately, you have to answer in English, because the jury, for the most part, I mean, apart from those people who are jurors in China, are in other countries generally non-Putonghua speakers, or some one or two of them might be, but in general, they're English language speakers. So if you say what you need to say in Chinese, then they will understand. So it is absolutely important to make your application in English.
Right. How about the types of contents that should be in the PowerPoint?
Well, the type of content, it's not necessarily easy to say, because it depends very much on your project. You need to show the project in the context of an environment, and these things again are I think set out in the application form. Let's see, I can look through it here. You need to have a location map, a site plan, project within the context of its surroundings, a development timeline, and then selected imagery, as it says in the guidelines of the final built and operating environment. So you do want to show what are the important aspects of your project, whatever they are. And every project, of course, is different. So, as I say, I can't say exactly what it should be. But if, say, your project is particularly sustainable, then, you want to show what the green aspects are. If it has great design, and probably many of the projects you get have great design, then show the aspects that make that design great. If it is something that serves the community, then show is a great example of when you want to show, in particular, lots of people in your pictures, and you show, good access to the site from outside. So it's not easy for me to say exactly what it is you have to show, but you want to tell a story, right? The jury is interested in seeing how your project was developed and what it is about your project that makes it good, and it fulfills the different criteria that you're trying to use to impress them.
Thank you.
We have some questions in chat for Colin. So one of them asks, is the office building project suitable for participating in this award?
Absolutely. We get a lot of office projects every year. And so, we welcome those. I suppose I would say it's office projects are not always easy to impress the jury, because a lot of offices are quite similar. I mean, an office serves a particular purpose, and it's to employ people and to have them at work. So you need to have something about your office building that makes it stand out. But that said, there are, as I say, many applicants that are received every year that are offices, and there are quite a few of them that do win awards. It's just that it's not simply a question of spending a lot of money and having a nice shiny office with lots of nice detailing and pictures and fixtures. It needs to have something about it that's a little bit unusual, that's in some way makes it stand out from the rest.
Another question here is large-scale regeneration plan and development of wasteland suitable for application?
Absolutely it is. And certainly that would probably be one in principle that would impress the jury, because we're looking to promote the idea of sustainability and of regeneration. There's so many opportunities in China in particular, but not just in China, around the Asia Pacific, where regeneration is important, particularly because inner city areas in cities around the Asia Pac are becoming completely built out. There's not really much space. And so the only way to actually create new space is by regeneration. So it's becoming more and more important for providing new land where people can create their projects. And it is also, I think, an area where you can be imaginative. Regeneration with the 798 project, as I showed, was one way, a very imaginative way in which this was executed. But however you do it, it is a theme that's very important right now, both to the ULI and in general. So we would encourage regeneration projects, either large or small scale, to submit.
What should they be preparing when a jury is coming to do the site visit?
Well, not necessarily that much. The jury wants to see what your project is about, and if you are selected, then you'll get more details at the time. But it's simply a question of showing them around the project, giving them access to different people. And this is probably, I think, the key part of it as far as preparing is concerned, is that you'll need to have people there that represents the design aspect and the development aspect, and I suppose also the operational aspect. If say it's retail, you want to have different people there that they can talk to who are actually operating as a retail participants. But you wouldn't need to prepare necessarily that much. It's just a question of showing them around, answering their questions. If in fact it's necessary to do a site visit virtually, then in that case, it's a little more preparation is needed, because of course we need to set something up using Zoom or using anyway some kind of a platform where we can communicate between the jury members on the one hand and the submission, the project submission people on the other, and hopefully see something of the project in real time. And what we've had in the past when we've done virtual site visits is people using, and this is one thing that is possible in China because you have such great internet and your bandwidth capacity is quite high. People taking us around the project in real time, using their iPhones or using some kind of a video showing different parts of the project. Sometimes you have different people using their iPhones who are in different parts of the project that hands the video presentation off to one another as they go along. We even had one last year that sent up a drone. In fact, it was at the river regeneration project that we showed before in Sweden. They sent up a drone and showed us the entire project from the air. And if you can manage something like that, then that's great. It really gives us a great perspective. So I think the video presentations probably take a bit more preparation, but the in-site visits, really you just meet the jury, show them around, answer the questions, and that's about it.
Is shopping center project suitable for application?
Absolutely. Retail projects, we get a lot, probably as many as any other. Again, we've seen several winners, I think, if I remember correctly, even coming out of China with retail projects. And I know that there are a lot of innovative retail projects in China that can serve as a case study or as templates for what can happen elsewhere in the world. So yes, very much so, we would look for retail projects coming out of China.
Can you quote some examples on the community aspect that the juries will be looking at?
Well, simply, we want projects that serve the community. So in the case of the project that was in Wangjing that I talked about, they were giving retail and food and beverage facilities to people who were in the community where they didn't otherwise have access to them. Otherwise, if you have, say, again, in the Swinning River Regeneration, you have parkland, which gives access to the community from, its slide is here, from the nearby city where there really isn't any parkland facility for them to access. Or really any type of facility which is intended to have a public purpose. So it could be, say, if it's an art gallery, it would serve the community. Again, the 798 project, again, coming up here, allows the public to enter and to use facilities there that are for food and beverage or for the arts galleries or for recreational purposes. If you provide recreation facilities that are open to the public, again, that would be serving the community. Very often we get projects, not just in China, but elsewhere too, where you're creating a gated community, which serves the residents, usually of a residential complex. And that's an example of a facility that is not serving the community, and which probably is not going to be looked at by the jury very favorably. We're looking to create open access. So if you have a facility which is in the middle of an urban environment, and where you have, say, as you very often have in China, large roads that divide it from the rest of the city, then it would be good to see ways that connect from your facility that offers a public space to the rest of the city. And that can be by way of tunnel, by way of footbridge, by way of pedestrian crossings. Sometimes you use imaginative ways to connect to the rest of the urban environment. So basically, we want that to see that access, and we want facilities that are open to the public, one type or another, that can be used.
If our entry project is a pure free public open space to the public, should we need to fill up the market acceptance and financial pages?
Yeah, so I understand the market acceptance part can be tricky. And it's probably less important for sure for projects which are purely open space to to show market acceptance. What I'd say about that would be again to have pictures showing people using your project, and if you have data that show how many people are coming in on a weekly, daily, monthly basis, then that would also be useful. What would also be useful in this context would be to show how it's financed, because very often these things are financed in innovative ways. Sometimes you will see a pure open space, which obviously isn't making much, if any, money, financed by the construction of housing or other commercial projects around the outside. And that has a dual benefit, because on the one hand, the projects that are near the open space have extra value because of the open space. And on the other hand, you create a communal facility that is useful for the rest of the community. So if your open space is part of a larger development in which that open space development is being financed by the other commercial developments surrounding it, then that's useful information to know. Also, if it's being financed by the government, and if possibly the government is financing it by providing land elsewhere to the developer that it can develop as a sort of compensation for creating the open space, then that's also an interesting financial means of making that development happen, which we're very interested in hearing, and which I think the jury would look on favorably.
We have a question on, can projects in the planning or construction stage enter the awards?
The answer is generally no. It's not simply a design competition. Some of the other competitions out there are design competitions, and you can enter without actually building your project. But this is one where you have to have built it. And not only that, but it has to be stabilized, which means in practice that you need at least 1 year in operation. Although, maybe less if it's a public project or an open space project, but in general, if it's a commercial project, you need 1 year of operation, and preferably even more, to show that it's stabilized and that you have, your vacancies are not very high, that your tenants have filled in, that you're seeing customers come to the project, and that it's being used and is being accepted. So generally speaking, it needs to have been completed. There's one exception to that, and that is where you're developing in phases, and say one phase or more phases of the overall project have been completed, but not the entirety of the project. And in that case, then you can enter for the phases that has been completed, so long as it is stabilized.
When I click on the submission button, does it mean I have to finish off the submission in one go? Is there a time preference? Is there a time limit on that page?
No, there isn't. When you click the submission, then you can fill in as much of the form as you want at a given time, and then come back to it. So, and very often that's what people do. They sort of do it in stages and do one bit at a time. There's no time limit apart from the overall deadline, which I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, Diwa, is 11th of March. But anyway, those details are actually on the web page there.
Thank you very much, Colin. I think that's all we have for now, unless anybody else has any additional questions. Of course, this recording will be made available for everybody to access after this session. And if you have any additional questions regarding your entry or wanting to enter the awards, there is an email address on our webpage for you to submit your questions for any follow-ups. As we don't have any more questions, well, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for joining today's session. And thank you very much, Colin, for answering everybody's questions. We hope you all have a good day, and we look forward to seeing your entries in the awards program. This program will now end. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.